Okay, we're going to call the meeting of Ukiah Valley Basin Groundwater Sustainability Agency to order. Clerk, please call the roll.
Director White,
Here.
Director Cardoza,
Here.
Director Brown,
Here.
Director Crane,
Present.
Chair Brown.
Here. Not used to that yet. Okay. I'd like to ask Miss Angelo to lead us all on the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, we'll move on to the consent items, and this is the approval of minutes from the June 15th, 2017 meeting. Do we have any corrections or additions?
I wanted to check on the spelling of Elizabeth Salomon's name.
Oh, Is it incorrect or?
Well, I need to.
Not sure.
It's not the way I remember it, but I don't know if I'm the authority on how her name is spelled. I think it has an E on the end.
I just received an email from her, so I'm not sure. Do you know, Nicole? Okay.
That's all I saw there.
Okay,
If it's correct, it's correct. If it's not, it should be corrected.
Okay. Anyone else? Directors? Seeing none, do I? It is the correct spelling?
The correct spelling of that name is Salomone.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
I would move that we accept the minutes as corrected.
I'll second it.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the minutes with the correction. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Hearing none. Minutes are approved. Okay. Next item. We do have the discussion and possible action to appoint an agricultural director. Ms. Duquette, do you want to give us a summary, please?
Sarah Duquette, Mendocino County. At the last meeting, you approved an application and a process to appoint the agricultural seat. So Devin Jones, Executive Director of the Mendocino County Farm Bureau, submitted a formal letter with the nominees as well as their application, and I'd like to invite her up at this time to make any comments on the nominations.
Ms. Jones.
Devin Jones, Mendocino County Farm Bureau. First, just to say thank you for the opportunity. Again, this has been kind of a process. We feel like we have 3 strong candidates today. Their information has been put in front of you. If you do have any questions for them, all 3 candidates are present with us today. So I'd encourage you to have conversation with them and any questions that you may like. But Farm Bureau is in support of all 3 of these candidates. Thank you.
Thank you. Directors, would you like to have each of the nominees get up to say a few words?
Sounds good.
Yeah. Sure.
So let us start with Mr. Chris Reddick.
Madam Chair, members of the board, thank you for allowing me to apply for this position. For those of you that don't know me, I've lived in Ukiah my whole life, homeboy, and I'm looking for an opportunity to give something back into this valley that's allowed me to earn a living for quite a while. Have any questions about my farming or any of that? I'm here.
I may have one question, but that goes back a couple generations. You may not be able to answer it. Of Ruddicks in Ukiah Valley. I'm
yes,
teasing
Carrie,
you.
your family beat me here by 2 years.
Thank you, Mr. Ruddick. Mr. Zach Robinson, please.
Hi, my name is Zach Robinson. Hush Vineyards is my family business. We grow grapes and make wine in Anderson Valley and in the Talmadge part of the Ukiah Valley. Let's see. Farming's been in the family for lots of generations. We've been growing grapes and making wine for 3. I don't think we can touch the Ruddocks or the Browns for longevity here. I actually have an educational background that may be relevant. I did environmental engineering in school with emphasis in groundwater modeling. I haven't touched those skills in many, many years, though. Any questions?
Brown University, is that correct?
Yeah.
Hey, good
That's
memory.
an easy one to remember, huh?
And that is true. Anyone questions?
Not at this time.
Seeing none, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Our next candidate, Levi Pollen, please come forward.
Hello, guys. My name is Levi Pollen. Not a very familiar name around these parts. I've been here for a total of 3 days, coming back after I left, and my family's been here for the last 9 years. The last 6.5 years I've spent down in Fresno and Tulare County and in Kern County, farming with Sunworld International and a family farm as well down there. And I've just recently moved back up here to Ukiah and plan on staying here for the foreseeable future. Down in Southern California, we've had the ability to farm almonds, walnuts, prunes, pistachios, and table grapes. I'm the director of farming as of last week for over 4,000 acres of table grapes. And during that time, I've been part of our ground recharge project, where we've gone ahead and put in over 300 acres of basins in the Tulare County and in Kern County area, where we've gone ahead and implemented new recharge projects in order to help recharge our aquifers down there in that area. Now, that might not sound like much, but our groundwater sits at 160 to 320 feet. My dad sent me a picture a few months ago where he touched water in a well with his hand 4 foot down. So it's a slightly different area, but I come from an area where we know what the problems can be if they go unaddressed for a long period of time. And I'm not saying that the groundwater here will ever be down to 130 to 140 to 320 feet, but it allows, in the last 6 years, I've had the ability to work with people down in the Southern Valley where water is an issue, where we've addressed issues that you haven't seen in this part of the world, and hopefully we never do. And my goal is to help this wonderful area that I now call home, my family calls home, so that we don't encounter those issues we face down there. Boron leaching into the water, nitrates in the water from dairy industries. These are all issues that we face on a daily basis down there. And I can take that knowledge up here to make sure that we can try and implement some form of policy that allows us to create a plan with Sigma so that we can continue to have water going forward. I think that kind of wraps up where I've been, and I look forward to being able to live up here. I was telling Mr. Pauly that it's like a vacation up here. 104 up here is like 111 down there, so I'll take it. Any questions, please?
I'm curious, why did you move?
My family's been here, I think we were doing the math, for 9 years after they were born and raised here. We moved down to the Central Valley, and then they moved back 9 years ago. And I decided that I wasn't quite done being in the Central Valley. So this last year, we've been expanding. Last couple of years, my family's been expanding up here into Potter Valley and Ukiah. And it got to the point where it was time for Dad and I to join forces again. We planned on it for the last 4 or 5 years, but it finally got to the point where we could make the transition. So looking forward to being back. Thank you. Any other questions?
Then your grandparents have been here for a very long time.
Few years.
They didn't leave. Your dad and Julie left. Mom and Dad went to college and didn't come home for a while.
My mom was smart. She went to Cal Poly, so did I. So that worked out well for us, and they got down to the Central Valley and decided that that's where they were going to call home for a while. So, but like I said, in 9 years they've been back now. It's hard to believe.
Yeah, that is. But thank you, and thank you for applying as well for our consideration.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, any questions? Anyone else of Mr. Pollen? Okay. Seeing none, directors?
I'd like to thank them all for stepping up. I really appreciate all the work that Frost and Devon have done, and getting some good candidates for us. Thank you.
Anyone? Mr. White?
Well, I would say we're fortunate to have people that have applied here. I would like to thank Chris for offering to help, but I was wondering, Chris, if it would break your heart if you didn't get this position.
No, absolutely not. I applied to see if I could help out. You know, I have about 13, 14 wells I'm in charge of.
Could you come up to, Chris, up to the microphone? I'm sorry.
I have about 13, 14 wells that we monitor on a regular basis. I'm familiar with the, you know, watching the ground level, water levels and stuff, and heard you people were looking for somebody to sit on the ag seat, so I volunteered.
Yeah.
Back to your original question, no. Whoever you people pick, it's fine with me. No hard feelings.
Thank you. So I was going to suggest that we take Zach Robinson. I think his background will be useful in wading our way through the bureaucratic aspects and the technical aspects of the plan that we have to create. I think I would make a motion that we give the seat to Zach, and we give the alternate seat to Levi. I believe that as he serves in the capacity as an alternate, he will become more familiar with the local issues, and his background as well offers, I think, a lot of help in going through this bureaucratic maze that we're about to enter. So that's my motion, that we give Zach as the seat and Levi as the alternate.
We have a motion on the floor. Do we have a second? We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none on this one, we will vote by the button. Oh, then why don't you do roll call? Not
Director
working, huh?
White,
Yes.
Director Cardoza,
Yes.
Director Brown,
Yes.
Director Crane,
Aye.
Chair Brown.
Yes. Hey, congratulations, and Chris, really appreciate it, and we hope you are here to help us out as well. It takes not only the agency itself and the directors, but staff and everyone in Ukiah Valley for us to get through this. Okay, and congratulations, gentlemen, Mr. Robinson, Mr. Pollen, and if you could get, I know your information is here, but you may have more contact information and get it into the clerk, that would be great. Thank you.
Is Zach to take a seat now, or is he seated? We seated
Oh,
Brandy.
that might be a good idea.
Yeah.
Can we do an oath of office? Because he can't sit without an oath of office. Do we have the paperwork to do that?
I'm not going to pledge, let's be clear.
We don't have.
What's this oath of office?
Okay, pardon? Okay,
We seated Brandy without it.
okay. Mr. Robinson? Yes. We don't have to do this, so come on up. And we'll seat you right over to the side of this dais, like we do for LAFCO and Planning Commission. Okay.
Chair
We'll
Brown, I'll
make
just
sure-
say
Make
to the
sure we
clerk,
have a name plaque for you
after
the
this,
next time.
he should do an oath of office before he leaves.
Pardon?
I'm thinking that he still needs to do an oath of office, and he can do that at the end of the meeting.
Okay, and maybe Brandy needs to do
So
one
Nicole.
too.
What does that entail?
It's just a swearing in.
What am I swearing on?
Your oath.
We'll get that to you.
All right.
I think there might be a slight difference just because with the tribal seat, we were confirming the nominations from the tribes, and the tribes themselves are sovereign nations.
We pre-oathed.
Oh,
We
okay.
pre-oathed.
You're pre-oathed. That works. So we'll just get Mr. Robinson after the meeting then? Okay. And for the rest of us here, we have to do it usually on a yearly basis or a term basis to take our oath of office. And
Do you have
so
one of these for Zach?
Form 700s too.
that's true, Form 700s. And that's why getting to the conflict of interest code is going to help us do what we need to do with that job. And golly gee, guess what? It's next on our agenda. It's okay. Ms. Duquette, can you please present the item?
Sarah Duquette, Mendocino County. At the last meeting, you had an item to review the conflict of interest code and the bylaws. And the direction from the last meeting was to have each of the agencies that are members to send their oath of office to the agency email address, and we distribute it. So we have the conflict of interest code for the city of Ukiah, for the county of Mendocino, and for the Russian River flood control. And that's a part of your packet. So today you have the opportunity to review and discuss the direction you'd like to go in terms of what do you want to see in a conflict of interest code and how do you want to proceed with developing it and bringing it back to the board.
Okay. And I think City of Ukiah, who were the new ones? That was City of Ukiah and Russian River flood control were the ones that we received in after our discussion at the last meeting.
And the counties.
Yeah, I think we had the counties in the packet from last time.
Oh, that's right, you're right.
Yeah. Okay. Board members.
I think I want to have it simple and short and sweet. It looks to me like this conflict of interest code, County of Mendocino, has what appears to be the standard sample conflict of interest code that you see on the FPPC website, which doesn't list all the details of the code. It just references them and says you got to comply with all this stuff that's in the code, and it references the code. And then the one from the district, the flood control district, basically gives a one-page designated position that pretty much covers it all. And I think that'd be fine if we just did that.
Simple.
If that's legal, that's as far as I'd want to go.
I know you're not a lawyer, but what's your comment?
I would recommend at some point, depending on the direction that you go, that you do have legal counsel review it, and maybe that's an in-kind service from one of the member agencies, just to make sure everything is good.
They're all fairly similar. The city's goes into detail about loans, and I think we could shorten that to a sentence or two, just saying that no director, advisor, or employee of the Groundwater Management Act can accept or be involved in any loans with anybody that does business with us. But they're all, other than listing all the titles, which we'll only have a couple, they're all fairly similar.
And that thing about the loans is part of the text of the code itself, as far as.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, I think that's
So
what
that's
we had.
included within the.
Yeah, all those pages were just reprinting what the law is.
So.
And I like the idea where it just says, adopted a regulation, terms of the standard conflict of interest code, and everything that's in there is what we'll comply with. That type of thing.
Was that a motion?
Yeah, and well, if we need a legal review on that, I believe, Tamara, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but we could have our lawyer review it and see if a little 2-page document would pass muster.
That was a motion, I'd second it.
I'll make that as a motion then, that we do just like a 2 or 3 page simple one, and we'll have the flood control district lawyer review it.
You have a second?
Okay.
Okay, any discussion? Seeing none, can we have a roll call vote, please?
Director Robinson?
Yes.
Director White?
Yes.
Director Cardoza,
Yes.
Director Brown,
Yes.
Director Crane,
Aye.
Chair Brown.
Yes. And so then Russian River Flood Control will take it for review and bring back the results to staff. Ms. Duquette? Sure, okay. And we can expect to have it perhaps on our agenda for the August
Yes.
meeting.
Yeah, we'll have it.
Right. Next action for us will be a presentation, discussion regarding the development of bylaws. Ms. Duquette?
Cedar Duquette, Mendocino County. And at this time, I'd like to invite up the Devin Jones from the Farm Bureau and the General Manager of Flood Control. We had the group met to look at the example bylaws that came out that we reviewed at the last meeting, and the group was Chair Brown, and the three of us before you. And so we looked at mainly the West Turlock one of what would work for our bylaws and what wouldn't work, and areas that's not specifically addressed in the bylaws that were in our agreement, and kind of picked out and made some few items that we wanted to include and start working on a working draft. So I'll let you guys add to give anything to say.
Tamara Alanis, Russian River Flood Control District. I don't have too much more to add. What we did do is we took these sample bylaws from these other GSAs, and we really tried to address some of the issues that we knew that had been outstanding in the front end of our GSA discussions, especially things like how are we going to do projects, or and really what we found was a lot of the bylaw language was almost mirrored kind of the approach that the JPA document itself took. So we really did start with our JPA document itself and kind of went section by section by section and really took the time to try to address the issues that we thought that we would be facing. And while we don't right now have a final draft to propose today, we have had work done by Ms. Duquette, who took the notes from our meeting, the highlights of the bylaws that we had discussed, and she put together a draft document that we're looking over right now and commenting on to get back to Ms. Duquette, hopefully with a proposal for our next meeting.
Devin Jones, Mendocino County Farm Bureau. Yeah, nothing to add. I think it was a good working group. Should be pretty straightforward, and I skimmed through the draft that Sarah sent out. And again, I want to thank the county for Sarah's time in this. It's been quite helpful.
Okay, and my report, I did have some questions, and there were a couple of items that I felt needed to be better stated, at least with the draft we've been looking at. But I think we really feel we'll have it for sure on the next agenda in August.
I believe so. I think reviewing the bylaws and possibly meeting one more time, we should be able to bring something back to this board in August for your review.
Okay, and is there a possibility we can also have a legal review, just to look at basically the draft before we bring it back?
Yes.
I think that's important, and I think all of us want to be able to take action when we can on items, so we don't delay all our formation and all the responsibilities we have in getting, I don't want to call it routine items, but we have to have these in order to move forward. Any other comment? Any questions, directors? Okay.
No.
All righty. Then we will move on. And the next item on the agenda is discussion and possible adoption of the proposed 2017-18 budget. Ms. Duquette?
Sarah Duquette, Mendocino County. So the JPA does require us to adopt a budget within 90 days of forming. And so we brought back the budget. It's the same as last time. This year's operating budget is $13,000. I highly doubt that we'll use all of the funds. We kind of tried to build in funds in case we needed professional services or unexpected expenses came up. This is based on $5,000 in dues from each initial member, which would total $20,000. So there's no changes from the last time you saw this item. And again, the required audit as the treasurer and controller will be taken care of by the county. The Mendocino County Water Agency will have the funds in a trust account. And any type of services or things that come up and be purchased will be purchased through the water agency and charged to the trust account. And then you guys will receive a quarterly report of the trust account so you can see all of the activity. Under the recommended action, I just wanted to go over a few things. So it would be adopting the budget. And a part of the JPA agreement also said that the dollar amount has to be specified in the bylaws. And at the last meeting, we asked for each of the organizations to go back to their respective board to approve that dollar amount of $5,000. Mendocino County did approve that, so we're good on that. Because once the bylaws are adopted, then the water agents will be able to invoice your individual organizations.
Okay, and so the other member agencies, have you had discussion or received approval from your governing boards for the contribution of the $5,000?
We have, it was in our budget, we approved our budget for the 2017-18, and
Okay.
it's there.
All righty. City of Ukiah?
Yes.
Upper Russian River Water Agency?
Yes.
So we do have a recommended motion. Is there further discussion on the budget? Do you have questions, Mr. Robinson, on the budget itself?
I just read down it, no questions.
Okay, thank you. Righty. So we do have a recommended action.
I'll move that we adopt the budget.
Okay, and it's also, there's several items there. Direct staff to include the initial contribution in the agency bylaws, authorize the county to invoice initial members upon adoption of the bylaws, and then the fourth item is to approve.
Oh,
Okay, is that your motion?
that's my motion, sorry.
Great, thank you.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and we have a second. This is on fiscal matters, so we will need a roll call vote.
Director Robinson,
Aye.
Director White,
Yes.
Director Cardoza,
Yes.
Director Brown,
Yes.
Director Crane,
Aye.
Chair Brown.
Aye. All righty. Next item on our agenda then is discussion. Oops, no, it's not. Is discussion of possible action regarding informal presentation on the Mendocino County Water Agency Proposition 1 grant to develop an initial groundwater sustainability plan. So we're going to receive a presentation on that. And do you like to give the summary and introduce our speaker?
Yes. At this time, I'd like to bring up Chris Watt and Brian Wallace with Laco Associates, who are contractors with the county. Back in 2016, the county applied for a grant with the Department of Water Resources. It's the county stressed basin grant. And it was an opportunity for us to start working on an initial groundwater sustainability plan and try to fill a lot of those data gaps. So we were successful in getting that grant. We've gotten a lot, we've done quite a bit with the grant, and we're pretty far along. So at this time, we're going to present the components of the grant, what's been completed, what still needs to be completed, and also give you information on the next round. So this specific grant was only eligible for counties, and there were specific criteria. So the next round of Proposition 1 funding that will come out will be for the actual sustainability plan, and so we'll give you a little information on what those timelines look like in case the agency or a member of the agency wanted to go forward with applying for the grant. So at this time, I'll turn it over to our consultants.
All right. Good afternoon. Chris Watt with Laco Associates. So we have just a short presentation, as Sarah said. It's really, we're going to talk about what was done in the past to obtain funding, what we're doing now, and some possible future actions for another round of funding. So, as Sarah said, there was the Stressed Basin grant that was awarded to the county from the 2014 Act, and there was around, what was the number, 250-ish, was awarded to prepare an initial groundwater sustainability plan, which we're in the midst of. And I think as we were moving through the GSA formation, you heard from us a number of times, giving you updates on where we were and what we've done, and we've done a lot of outreach through the Farm Bureau and other entities to obtain information. So as Sarah said, we've been assisting the county in providing technical support during the GSA formation and the initial groundwater sustainability plan. My colleague Brian is going to go over where we are on the sustainability plan and the deliverables that we have completed and the ones that are still in progress.
Brian Wallace, LACO. So as you can see here, items that have green check marks are things that we have completed and submitted to the Department of Water Resources as part of the grant. The 3 remaining items are in progress right now. So one thing that we did, and this is, we looked at the groundwater sustainability plan guidelines in order to make sure that we were on track with developing something that would be able to be implemented in a GSP in the future. And one component is to characterize all of the groundwater data that we have up till this point in time, looking at the California State Elevation Groundwater Monitoring wells and the data that's available for them, the Department of Water Resources wells, and also GeoTracker wells, which there's thousands and thousands of data points that came from groundwater remediation projects that are available online. So we developed a database in Excel that shows the wells, if there's an associated well completion report that goes along with it, and a hydrograph with all of the available data that has been collected over time. This needs to be updated every time the CASGEM well system has another, basically gets updated twice a year. So this database needs to continue to be updated throughout the SIGMA process. This is an example of a hydrograph in a GeoTracker well showing just the water level fluctuating up and down. And I made maps to demonstrate where those GeoTracker wells are and databased significant amount of different GeoTracker wells. We also used 2,500 well completion reports that we obtained from the Department of Water Resources to characterize where we have data, where we don't have data. And we also used this data and we analyzed these well completion reports as part of the hydrogeologic conceptual model that we're working on right now. One component of the project was to develop a surface water groundwater data gap analysis. So we identified, here's all the groundwater data that we have, all of the surface water data that we have, where the wells are, where the stream flow gauges are. We also provided some recommendations for where new stream flow gauges could be implemented to further characterize surface water groundwater interaction in the future. And we looked at temporal data gaps, which are time dependent. We had a lot of data after 2000, like the 1980s to 2000, when the GeoTracker wells came on. Can you please go to the next slide? Next one again. Never mind, sorry. Go back one. So we had a lot of data throughout time. Now we have more data. In the past, we didn't have as much. This is a representation of some different DWR wells that have data that go back to the 1960s. And this gives an idea for how stable the groundwater hydraulic head is over time. And as I pointed out in a previous presentation, the graph on the left, the slope of that graph is a 0. So it demonstrates that there's no long-term decreases in groundwater elevation at all. So, but these are just 4 data points for 4 different wells in the Ukiah Valley. There's a lot more wells out there, so there could be certain areas that have lower, decreasing heads over time. And then in this map here, you can see yellow zones that have limited groundwater data. So in the future, as part of the groundwater sustainability plan, coming up with means and methods of obtaining well completion data and well logging in these areas would be good to fill in those gaps along the Russian River. So I looked at the hydrogeologic conceptual model requirements in the groundwater sustainability plan, and these are the sections of the hydrogeologic conceptual model that need to be addressed. The first one is a literature review characterizing all of the previous studies that took place, doing a background of surface water groundwater interaction and how much data there is there. The basin setting component describes the different geologic formations in the Ukiah Valley groundwater basin. And we need to define where the bottom of the groundwater basin is. And that's a difficult task. There's been one study that was conducted by a Humboldt State thesis student, and she used a gravimeter to essentially identify what formations pulled more gravity. And she was able to come up with estimates for how deep the aquifer systems are and where the hard bedrock is located. So we have a couple data points for that, but there's a lot of data gaps there. We also need to identify what the principal aquifers and aquitards are. And in this valley specifically, there is not any indication of giant clay layers that impede flow throughout the different formations. So that part is going to be a little bit skinnier there. And then these are two examples of cross sections that we had from previous studies. And we cut our own cross sections based on the well completion data that we obtained from Department of Water Resources. And Chris went through the well logs and was able to identify where the alluvial, the top layer there is the alluvium, and then the one below that's called the Ukiah beds. And defining where those interfaces are was one component of the 3D characterization of the geometry of the aquifer complex or groundwater basin. I use those two terms interchangeably. So we just cut, this is the Redwood Valley section.
Yeah, just to not go too much into detail here, but there's been few basin-wide groundwater studies of this area. There was one in the 60s and one in the 80s, and then there's been some compilations. And so this might be more of a lumped set of formations than you might see in other places where they split them out. Like, we have basically two groundwater units. We have the young and the old is pretty much the way to put it. And they're trying to parse out and, like, for example, I'll point over here, trying to parse out differences in year that might be regionally distinct or valley-wide zones was virtually impossible. We had 2,000 well logs that we had to interpret crude handwriting and obscure language on, in addition to the ones that were drilled by the government. And so
that one well driller encountered lava at 380 feet.
Yeah.
Wow.
So in the future, through it's cured. In the future, for example, like here's let me see. You can see how simplistic these are. In the future, we may be able to, let's just to get a sense of scale here. The vertical thickness of this youngest alluvium is in the 100 to 200 foot range. And then below that, you get into the Ukiah beds. And trying to distinguish this line from all of these well logs was an exercise in lumping, basically, and having to come up with a characteristic of what's the difference between these two. And the predominant characteristic is one is a lot more clay and is a lot denser than this younger, looser material. So you can see most of the wells are in this young material here, but up in Redwood Valley in particular, there's quite a few wells that go down into this QTUB, and there might be quite a bit of variation in those from north to south in the UB, and we just don't have enough information to distinguish that. But for the purposes of the basin boundaries and the groundwater sustainability plan requirements, this is sufficient, and we would refine it as needed for the purposes of the sustainability management criteria in the future. Just to give you a little bit of what these pictures represent, there's a lot of effort that went into these. Oh, and then this one that has some more work to be done on it. So one of the questions that came up, and I think Director Crane asked it at one of the meetings to our colleagues over at Davis, was what happens at the south boundary. It might have been, yeah. So, and is water spilling out of how does water exit our basin, basically? So we had the pleasure of taking a tour with Max Schlinger. Yeah. Schlinger. And his property occupies this area. And he gave us a tour of his property and shared a lot of his information with us. And through that, we've come up with some very simplistic geometry here, which is this is the outlet right here. That's where all the water that comes out of the basin goes through that little funnel on Max's property. And we're going to refine this with a series of wells that he has. I think he has about 5 or 6 of them.
What's the floor?
Pardon me?
What is the floor of the?
It's Franciscan bedrock.
How deep?
If you, on this here, it's about 80 feet, and that's a projection of some of the geometry combined with the well logs. It's shallow.
Right, and that's in relation to surface at that location?
Yep.
Yeah.
What's the base of it in relation to?
Further up in the
say
basin.
The center in the valley?
Okay, so if we just, maybe I can see better here. So if we run this across, the bottom of it is at about, say, 450 feet or so elevation. And if we go back up to the higher in the Talmadge, for example, which would be the next section north of there, the bottom is at 500. So clearly it's draining down out this area. The geometry of the basin is such that the floor slopes to the south from Talmadge to the boundary.
That's even in counting the deepest part of the newer material.
At Talmadge, yes. If you look up here, because there's an interest.
Slide back.
Right here.
There.
Yeah. So what's interesting is that this basin's been modified by tectonic activity, and we have a fault that runs through our valley that's active, and you can see how, for example, the floor has this break in it, and that, as Brian mentioned, we had the luck that there was a student at Humboldt State that used a gravity measuring device to gauge these levels. But again, it's very crude. I mean, it's plus or minus 100 feet or more, how these offset. But what it has done over time is it's created these, like, for example, this low spot up here. So the activity of the fault has caused some of the basin to go down and some of it to go up. Like, for example, the Regina Heights area is an uplifted area along the fault. And in the north part of the basin, there's actually a down-dropped area, a graben.
Your comment about the outflow, does that mean that when you do a water balance for the entire basin, you actually show a significant flow in a north to south direction at the bottom of the basin?
We were actually doing the math on that, and it's primarily comes to the surface as stream flow.
Yeah. Okay.
So the amount of flow out of the basin in the subsurface is a fraction, is a decimal place of the amount coming out on the surface. But that's why we went down there and looked at this, because we didn't know how big this was. We didn't know if this was a huge alluvial section, if it was a large area. So we were able to put some constraints on it.
So although it is lower,
Yeah.
it is small.
Right.
So the amount of drainage through that narrow gap is less than
Right.
what moves through the stratas in the valley.
And because of conservation of mass, it basically comes to the surface and flows out above ground.
So another component of the GSP that we are working on in the initial groundwater sustainability plan is the water budget. And the UC Davis student Maritza did a lot of work on this already. So in order to avoid duplication of efforts, I'm going to be building a groundwater model using ModFlow to further enhance the work that she did and continue to look at ideas or, how much water could be flowing out of that southern boundary. If there's any boundary flow coming in from the sides, from the Franciscan in the ways of seeps or springs, and to further look at the impacts of surface water groundwater interaction and try to get a better idea about, is the water coming from the groundwater into the river all year round, or is it only sometimes? And I'm going to do a monthly time scale similar to what Maritza did. And I began doing some model development where I incorporated the digital elevation model, the CASGEM and GeoTracker wells, and the rivers and streams so far, and have started to address dissertization of the groundwater environment. And this component of it is very important because it depends on, if you look at, for instance, USGS is going to be building a coupled groundwater surface water flow model for the entire Russian River Basin. But for them to be able to do that, they have to have a coarse dissertization. They can't have a lot of points in the Ukiah Valley, or else the model will take a week to run, and they need to run this model thousands and thousands and thousands of times to be able to calibrate it. So in my opinion, I think it would be wise to build a model that's for the Ukiah Valley with the budget that we have for the water budget, and further characterize this and do the best that we can, and then give that information to the USGS at the end of this 2017 period, and then they can do a better job representing the Ukiah component of their bigger model. But I do not feel that their model is going to have high enough resolution in this area to be able to properly characterize what's going on here. So,
yeah, I mean, in essence, we're having our TV has better resolution than their TV. I mean, that's what they're looking at a geography that's many times the size of the basin.
Macro, micro.
Yeah, and so since we can have the same number of squares they have, except we have it in a small area.
So using the data from the UC Davis thesis, the hydrogeologic conceptual model with estimates of the aquifer geometry and properties, and the 8,000 different monitoring well points that we have in stream flow gauge information, we can build a model that will better represent the budget components and come up with better estimates for surface water groundwater interaction than just not using a model at all. And the important part is the calibration, where you take a well where we have we know what the water level was on a certain point in time. The groundwater model produces a result, and then a different program compares the two numbers and says, okay, look, they're different by this much. I'm going to change the aquifer properties a little bit and tweak it, and then rerun the model and identify if it's any closer, and keep doing that thousands of times until it calibrates to the actual well data. And that's a good way to calibrate the groundwater budget. And as I talked about before, being able to provide more information to USGS for their development of their GS flow model.
I have a question. The quality of that well data would be pretty important. If it's poor quality, that thing's going to calibrate forever and never find it. So is any well data the same, or is there just specific high quality data that you're using?
Yeah, that's a great point. The good thing about the CASGEM and the DWR wells is they follow a protocol that's written, and there's training, and so we feel that is high quality data. The GeoTracker data was collected under the direction of licensed professionals, and so it's such a large number, and it's surveyed to a datum. It's required by law, so we feel that's good. What we don't have a lot of is private well owner records, and again, how they made the measurements and whatnot. We don't have any of that information, so we don't know how to make a judgment, but it's a consideration. If somebody happened to be keeping the record of water level in their wells, and we interviewed them and found out how they were doing it, and it was a reproducible process, then we would take that in and mark it as from its source. So
How
it is
much,
important.
how much value would that be? How much of an enhancement of what you get would that additional information provide?
I'll point that out for you right here. See these yellow areas? That's where we don't have a lot of information. So if there's private wells that are in those areas where there are records, those would be valuable. And going forward, those are potential areas where people could come into the CASGEM program and have their well monitored. Of course, it has to be a well that's not being used. It has to be static. Or we could get funding to drill wells to collect measurements. Dr. Crane?
The yellow does or does not lay primarily on the upper part of the formation, the shear plane?
Sure, yeah. I'll let Brian jump in, but I think that they're along the area where the surface water groundwater interaction analysis would take place. So it would be along the tributaries and the Russian.
I was speaking to the image of the drop block.
Yeah, right here. Yeah. Like right
That
there.
one.
Yeah, most of the wells are gonna, most of the wells that we're gonna look at are not gonna get down into this area. They're gonna be, oh, you're talking maybe right here? This is actually up higher. The Russian River is,
Well, I was thinking of the dark brown.
oh. Yeah, I don't know. The only well that the wells that are drilled into the Franciscan, there's, I think a couple up in Redwood
I wasn't
Valley.
thinking of the wells in it. I was thinking about comparing the plan view, the aerial view, and the yellow areas in relation to that shear.
Right. We don't have that overlap, but it would, this is the map of the fault zone right here. And yeah, so we'd have to overlay those to see that.
Yeah, I was curious about that overlay.
Yeah, that's, yeah, we can definitely do that.
I can send it to you.
Yeah.
Well, I guess
Director White, did I answer your question?
Yeah, only reason I asked that was if it's necessary, if it's important, if it's going to make a difference, if it's going to improve our position here, it would be useful for those yellow areas to be given to the Farm Bureau as a, do you know anybody that's in these areas, and do they have any information that would be useful, and are they willing to share it?
And we've done that and had not good response. I don't know if folks are ready to.
Mike Hildreth provided a lot of great information,
Yeah.
and he was the only person that stepped forward and provided information.
But yeah, we want to continue. The outreach is part of the GSP, and so now that there's a formal agency, perhaps if the agency made the outreach through their meetings, then we may get a better response. I think in the beginning there was we got a lot of like, why do you need this, and what's going to happen to me if I share it with you, and who's going to come, and there was a lot of concern, rightly so, about that.
Well, I guess if I were one of these people, to me, two things I would want to know is what's going to happen to me if I don't give you that information. Am I going to get some terrible plan that's going to ruin my life, or doesn't it matter that much? In which case, I'd rather not. Or how critical is this to having a successful plan that means that people can go back and
Right. Well, so to give you here we can represent it. So if this is the pixels that represent the net that we will model on, they're equivalent in size. And so if I have one well right here and I have one well right here, then those are representing the area in between those points. So I have one well representing the conditions of 200 acres or more. And so if I have, simply put, if I have an equal distribution of wells and the density is 1 per 200 acres versus 1 per 1 acre, I'm going to have a much finer model, whereas my estimations are going to be more accurate.
Right, but I guess understanding how we got here and where we want to be when we're done. I don't think there's anyone that thinks we have a problem here. That's kind of where
Not
we're
in
at.
this room, but yeah.
Well, and I mean, I think anyone that has access to what information there is doesn't think we have a problem, and it's our task to convince the water board that we don't have a problem and that we don't need to do a lot of stuff to show that we don't have a problem and that we can continue to demonstrate that. So do we have enough information now to say we can say that if we had more data, we could say even more convincingly that we don't have a problem? Or are we in a position where we don't know if we have a problem or not, and we need this data to make a statement?
I think that going
Yeah,
ahead
yeah.
with this model and saying this is what we can do with the data that we have will give us more insight to that question. But I know that the more data that you have, the better your results will be. And can you go back to the left one? And like as you see here, there's a lot of data near Ukiah. There's a couple points in the Talmadge area. There's not a lot of data in the northern Redwood Valley area. And there's not very much down in the McNabb area either. So it'll do a better job in those regions, but there's definitely going to be a lot of gaps where it's just, using interpolated hydraulic conductivity and storativity values throughout, and it's not going to be realistic. So,
Well, I want to make the point that Director White brought up broader is there's sustainability criteria that we have to look at. And I think we would all agree we don't have saltwater intrusion, right? And I think this is something that Sean spoke to when the UC Davis folks presented. We don't have a declining groundwater trend. We don't have subsidence. We don't have areas of pollution in groundwater that are being exacerbated. So there's all these sustainability criteria. And then there's the one that is probably the most controversial for this basin, which is the depletion of surface water from the pumping of groundwater. And that is a very difficult question to model and predict because it is very transient and it requires a very good understanding of this geometry here and the properties of these shapes.
Well, and I think that would be really critical if this were a natural river. But the reality is that we store all that water, which is then released into the river to maintain flows.
We're not worried about the main stem. It's the tributaries.
Okay.
Yeah. And there's most of the wells that are on the main stem are already licensed as underflow and have surface water rights. So there's likely very little area along the main stem where, and folks have built ponds. So that main stem is not, as you said, it's controlled. They can control the releases. There's already ponds to divert water for frost. There's licensed underflow wells. So that's probably not the area that's going to be critical. It's going to be where the tribs come through the basin down to the Russian.
Well, given the fact that the Russian has downcut because of the dam, these tribs all disappear into the alluvium.
By April or May, yeah.
So, again...
And there's the critical period of March to April when the frost pumping occurs and you have the fish migration. I mean, that's the... If you want to get really down to it, it's the tribs in the spring when the fish migration is happening and the frost occurrences happen and the flows are declining. Yeah. I mean, getting really down, that's the area that we're going to be looking at. That's the area that's being looked at. That's why this basin got ranked medium.
Okay, so what we have is we have a specific area and a specific time frame that we would want to focus.
That's what we're still working on, and we're coming up with and are going to be presenting to you our ideas about how to address and manage the sustainable criteria, of which for this basin it is that surface water, groundwater, and depletion condition.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you for that. That was good. Okay, so.
Can we hang on just one
Yeah,
moment?
sorry.
It's fine. Did you have something, Tamara?
I just wanted to, on that very topic, make sure that you're working with the ISRP document that identifies the critical,
Yes.
appropriate fish habitat types of streams that you're going to look at.
Yeah,
so
and
you're
that just
not,
came out. Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, that, we're narrowing the target.
And Chris, do you have a copy of their study?
Yeah, it came out a couple months ago.
Yeah, I downloaded it.
Yeah.
Okay, because I have.
Yeah, we
And
got
you
it
need
as soon as it came out.
Okay.
Based on your exchange right there, it sounds like the critical areas where we might benefit from more data aren't necessarily the zones where we don't have a high density of wells. The one you showed in the yellow, they may be the political hot zones where tribs are discharging into the river, or the lower reaches of the tribs. And that's where the benefit may come from additional data.
Yeah. Yeah, these are, there's a lot of areas we just don't have information. And we have well logs, but we don't have water level changes over time. And so we're projecting these data points out across this whole area. And we know that there's subtle changes at the tributaries where groundwater pumping and surface water depletion is a critical issue.
Mr. White, did you have a question? Or a comment? Please come forward, state your name for the record.
I don't know, is this on? Anyways, Sean White, City of Ukiah. I definitely agree with the overall point that it's, essentially the frost season in tributaries is probably where we have the most risk to being over appropriated in some years. But I think for this project, most of the people that are in those locations don't frost protect from a well. They all frost protect from surface water. So it's not groundwater depleting surface water, it's just straight depletion of surface water. And the reason of it is really just mechanics. Most people don't have a well with enough flow to do the high demand instantaneous peak kind of things they use with frost. There are very few people that I know of that have little steady engines that charge a pond, but for the most part, frost protection is done from either a pond where they've used some slower mechanism, or from surface water. But I don't know of, and I've seen most of them, any tributaries that aren't part of really interconnected to the regulated river where they're using a well to frost protect because they just don't produce enough water to do it. That'd be my comment.
Yeah, and to Sean's point on that, there's a group that's been working with the folks that do frost protection on the tribs, and we've been, again, there's some of this is just getting information and people are not ready to give it for a variety of reasons. And I know that there's a group that has been, there's an associated body that's been working to help people that use groundwater on tribs address the frost protection rules that were published by the Water Board. And we've been trying to interface and get that information, and it's just, again, it's sensitive. I think folks don't know what it's going to do when you give the information out, and so we haven't been able to get it. And I think to Sean's point about that, there's probably, I don't know, on two hands number of wells out there that may even come into scrutiny for the potential for surface water depletion. And to Mr. White's point, there's not an issue, but we just have to prove it and have the information to support it. And then we've satisfied the the DWR.
So it would sound like if we can identify that there could be a problem here if someone had a well and they were doing it, that's as far as we have to go.
And then what's our sustainable management criteria would be if you happen to be pumping groundwater in this area, follow these rules.
Something like
and we're
that.
done.
Yeah.
Right? Because that's the management.
Right.
And as Sean pointed out, there may be just a handful. And so it really makes this an exercise in just proving something that doesn't actually exist.
And one thing that I would like to add is there is a misconception, or this is what I want to do with the model, is to identify, is the Russian River head way higher than the groundwater head? And when people run groundwater wells, all the water comes out of the river and goes into those groundwater wells, and then they use it? Because that's what I think certain people may believe. And then, the more information we have about what's going on along the river, the better we can calibrate that and say, no, the water's flowing from the groundwater into the river, and then the groundwater wells pull a little bit of that out, that water that would be discharging to the river. But where's reality, and when does it occur? And I feel like quantifying that in the water budget would be a good way to show exactly what's going on. Or you can never say exact, but do you have a better idea about that and the bigger kind of macro things here, so that, oh yeah, they're not stealing water from the Russian.
Yeah, it's basically to the satisfaction of the agency that's going to approve the plan.
And then this, submission will give some good insight to their criteria about their judgments of how good it is. So quick progress report. We've completed the top 4 items. Based on my judgment, the hydrogeologic conceptual model is 80% complete. Water budget with inclusion of the groundwater model is about 50% complete. And as we briefly discussed, the sustainability criteria, what are the rules going to be, guidelines for people that are on tributaries, that's about 10% complete. And we'll have all of these things done November, December, and be able to present on them. Next slide.
Did you say December?
Yeah, December. So looking at the actual groundwater sustainability plan criteria, this is the items that we are addressing in the initial groundwater sustainability plan. And we got one of them with the monitoring protocol manual was in Article 3. Article 5 is the plan components, and the ones that have check marks here are assumed to be complete. And go to the next one. And this is the whole Article 5 plan content. So with the initial groundwater sustainability plan, we've hit on the blue sections. The orangish brown ones are the ones that are in progress. And like the black ones are the ones that are not included in the 2015 Sustainable Groundwater Planning Grant that will need to be addressed to develop a complete groundwater sustainability plan for submission to Department of Water Resources by 2022.
So as we talked about in the beginning, there's what we did in the past, what we're working on now, and then what needs to be done. And the grant from 2015 was the initial groundwater sustainability plan grant, which covered, as Brian said, basically the blue and part of the brown. And so what's left to be done to fulfill is the rest of the brown and all of the black, and that would be what the state is funding for the next grant solicitation. And there's the GSAs, now that they're created, are the eligible agencies, and there's $86 million available to fund basically the remainder of the GSP development statewide for GSAs. So it's an opportunity. The grant submission, so that supposedly the application package is going to come out next month, and you would have basically a couple of months to get it done. A lot of the work that we did before and that we're doing now that for the water agency will flow right into that. It will lay out what needs to be done, and with your help and getting these suggestions we got today are fantastic. It'll help us craft what the tasks are specifically and the level of effort that needs to go into them to apply for a grant. So that's so here's the projects that go with it. You have planning, development, and preparing the plan to meet Sigma. And that's the balance of the plan from where we are today, or will be by the end of the year anyway. So yeah, if there's any questions on that, through the chair, if the directors have any, it's for discussion, if this is something that is interesting to the GSA.
Mr. Robinson, did you have a question? Okay.
Thank you.
Well, I think we need to, in that kind of lease. Pardon? Oh, Susan, please come forward. I'm sorry.
I didn't know if the public were invited.
You're always invited. Come on, speak.
So I'm wondering if you could give a lay person a definition of discretization and why it's important, please.
Yeah. So think of it as pixels on your television. If you had 4 or 5 pixels on your television, it'd be really hard to make out what was there. But if you had 1 million, it would be a very clear picture. And so, as Brian said, if you're modeling the entire Russian River Basin, your computing power can only handle a certain number of pixels. So you're going to have really big pixels because you have a lot of area to cover. Whereas if we are just doing the Ukiah Basin, it's a smaller geographic area, and with the available computing power, we would have a higher density of pixels per area. So it provides a higher resolution, which would then be able to answer the question of where is that area that we need to be concerned? Is it because my pixels are really big and my pixels are 10 acres across, I have to draw it out 10 acres. If my pixels are 1 acre, I can narrow that point of interest.
And you refine that by starting out with 10 by 10, 10 rows, 10 columns, 100 cells. You put a well in the middle of it, and then you look 100 feet to the side. In that point, what is the drawdown at the well? And then you increase it to the next value, 20 by 20, 40 by 40, 60 by 60, and you keep looking at that same point. And when the drawdown in that location from that pumping starts to plateau off, then you know that you're reaching a discretization that is good enough quality. And so it definitely affects the results of a model, and especially with pumping wells and the interaction between different nodes. So that's another thing to say, yeah.
Thank you.
Did I get it for you?
Susan, you've been sitting too long. Take another walk and put your name into the record for us, please.
You wanna talk
Right
about
at the
the,
microphone.
That's nice. Here.
Oh, okay.
How about right now? You're walking the walk. The clerk corrected me, so anyone coming up, please put your name into the record first.
Like this? How?
No. Just say your name for the
Susan
recording.
Knuff, I live in Ukiah.
You are good. Thank you. Huh? Okay. Well, I'll have her send the notes to you. Okay. Okay, anyone else do have anything? All righty. Come forward. State your name for the record.
Devin Jones, Mendocino County Farm Bureau. Just a quick question in terms of, it seems like December or the end of the year is the deadline. So do you have any other specific sub-time frames of specific project completion between now and December?
We don't have the schedule here. I think, Brian, you have it memorized, right?
Yeah, so the water budget in the model, the end of November, same thing for the hydrogeologic conceptual model, and then the sustainable management criteria by the end of December for submission, and then the whole project needs to be complete and submitted to the Department of Water Resources in December, at the end of December.
So to Devin's point, I guess what I'm reading into your statement is, are we going to have enough done to be able to have a project for a grant submission? Is that okay?
By October?
So
the deadline for
yeah, I mean what we won't have is the sustainable management criteria, but we know the data gaps. We have a conceptual model. I think there's plenty of information that we don't have that we can put into the grant to help complete it, and I don't think there's going to be information that's going to come out of the water budget or the sustainable management criteria that's going to necessarily change a grant application.
So I guess the question comes, who's going to write the grant?
Well, I don't have an answer to that question. But I'd also like to add, Sarah DeCamp, Mendocino County. We can definitely come back when the final solicitation package is out there. I'd also like to add, most of the Ukiah Valley Basin is a disadvantaged community, which really increases our odds of actually getting funded for this grant. And we also have this previous grant. So we've been working frequently with DWR, and I think we're definitely making progress. So I think there's a lot of things that puts us in a good position to have funding, and the more funding we can get from grants, the less funding we'll need for the individual agencies, because until a GSP is adopted, you don't really have any mechanism to levy fees or have any type of funding. And so most of the work that's going to be done between now and 2022, it's all going to essentially be in-kind contributions from the member agencies. So the more grant funding you get, the better your budget will be.
So the last grant was written by my staff with Sarah's support, and so I think we make a good team, and we'd be, you know, on a promotional level, we'd be willing to do it again.
We probably should have discussion at the next meeting. When is that coming out from DWR for submittal?
I think it's in August, and I just also like to make a distinction between writing a grant and then what happens if you get the grant.
Correct.
So, you know, we can really just put our focus on, or whatever the board likes to do, a focus on trying to look at the grant solicitation package and how we can get the application in, and then if we're successful, taking the next chunk. Okay, we got the dollars. How are we going to use the dollars? But we can hope. I'm not sure. I can't predict when in August they're going to, so we can keep an eye out for it and definitely have information to you. I think our meeting's second Thursday in September. We could for sure have something then on what the package is.
Because DWR staff has asked me if we're going to apply. Plus, we received information from Molka saying it's coming out.
Yes, and we'll have also more information coming up on the next item about some other services that we can utilize for the GSP process in terms of more grant funding that DDR is putting forward.
Anyone, any more questions, statements? Anyone from the audience that wants to come up? Okay. Thank you very much. Now we move on to and this is really great.
And thank you to the directors for the questions. Those are extremely helpful. There's a lot of knowledge up there that we want to make sure to get the benefit of.
Exactly. Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. All righty. Next, we'll have an informal update on facilitation support services available for groundwater sustainability plan development through the Department of Water Resources, DWR.
Here to get Mendocino County. So during the formation of this agency, we applied for a DWR assistance for facilitation, and we were granted that assistance. And so we were the Center for Collaborative Policy, as a part of Cal State Sacramento, was our facilitator. And Malka sent us this information. So they're going to start moving their focus towards GSP development. So we wanted you guys to be aware that there is funding. So if you felt like we needed facilitation services again to do some type of public outreach or work with different sectors within the Ukiah Valley Basin to try to move forward on the GSP, we just want to let you know that that application is going to be opening and that those dollars are available. So it's, the DWR facilitation support form is attached. So if you have any questions, we can try to answer that, and just for your consideration.
Comments, directors?
I didn't think we got much for our money with Mulga. I don't think we need to go that way.
Okay.
I think we're doing fine.
Okay. Any other comment? Any comment from the public? Seeing none, we will move forward then on the agenda. Our next item is G, discussion and possible action regarding an additional member on the Technical Advisory Committee. And I guess this is perhaps something I need to present. During the Eel Russian River Commission meeting, we had Laurel Marcus through the California Land Stewardship Institute come forward to talk about the independent science review panel and their study and information, and I think you referred to it earlier, Chris. And after that meeting, she said, gosh, I'd really like to go on the technical committee if possible. Brought this up at the last meeting under directors' reports and have come back with this meeting to receive input from the directors and whether they want to appoint her to that position or not. So it's open for discussion.
Well, I know Laurel has some health issues that tying her down for a few months, but she expects to be back in action, and I think she would be a great asset in this process. So, I would move that we add a representative from the California Land Stewardship Institute to the Technical Advisory Committee and include the CLSI in the MOU, and that person be Laurel or someone that she chooses to put in her place.
Oh, okay, great. So we do have a motion. Do we have a second?
I second that motion.
A motion and a second, and I'd just like to say I really support it. Actually, I was a founding member, one of the board members for CLSI, and sat on its board for quite a while until I went on to the position I hold today as a county supervisor. But I've worked with Laurel in the Russian River watershed. Gosh, I think the first time I worked with her had to have been 88, 89, and have always appreciated her approach and appreciated her confidentiality in working with private landowners, and then her willingness to step forward and help organize other scientific reviews and finding the money to do so. And with the fish-friendly farming program, being able to take it out of the Russian River watershed and Navarro watershed so that all these other areas within the region could take advantage of that particular program was very necessary, and I think we've all seen it flourish through the years. So I'm very much in support of the motion. Anyone else? Okay. We have a motion and a second. Clerk, please do the...
Director Robinson?
Aye.
Director White?
Aye.
Director Cardoza?
Aye.
Director Brown?
Aye.
Director Crane?
Aye.
Chair Brown?
Yes. All righty. And we'll inform her. I will do that as the chair, if that's okay with everyone. And then, may I just ask a question? The MOU for the Technical Advisory Committee. How are we going to go forward with that? Or is that do we need to have a discussion on that now?
I think we can have a discussion on that. So based on your action you just took, I would also include in the bylaws how you can add members to the TAC because there is going to be an MOU agreement. We do have an outline of the MOU that was created during the formation process, and Sonoma County took the lead. So I would recommend maybe in August or September having a discussion and an item with the Mendocino County Resource Conservation District and inviting Sonoma County Water Agency to come to the meeting and the land trust to talk about moving forward on an MOU agreement. There's not necessarily a huge rush. We aren't creating the GSP just yet, so I think we have a little bit of time in terms of getting the bylaws finalized, getting an MOU agreement finalized, and getting that signed by all the organizations. But hopefully at one of the upcoming meetings we can schedule an item and start working towards having a completed agreement.
Great. And Patty, is she still here? Oh, she left. Okay. For the RCD, I wanted to ask her. Oh, Tamara. Sure. Please state your name for the record.
Tamara Alaniz, Russian River Flood Control and Water Conservation Improvement District. Thank you for bringing that up, Chair Brown. I also had a request from staff at Sonoma County Water Agency just asking kind of when we were going to get back to that issue and talk about it. So this is what I'll report back to them, that we're going to talk about it in August or September, and we'll work together with staff to put together a precursory meeting. Thank you.
Okay, and who was your contact person at?
Mr. J. Jaspers.
Oh, I think I know that man. Okay, thank you. All righty. Any other comments? We're on to the next item. Status update on the Groundwater Sustainability Agency notice submitted to the Department of Water Resources. Give us an update.
Very exciting. If I can have the clerk turn on the screen for me, I'll actually show you our submission. So included in this item, you'll see a email back them notifying us that it's been posted. I also received a phone call from the department, from Mark Norberg in the Department of Water Resources, confirming that our information looked good, they were going to post it. And so I wanted to show you the actual posting online and where you can find it. It is a 90-day posting, so we'll be official in September. And we also have the link to our posting on our website so that people can find it. So I'm just going to pull that up. So we did create a website for the agency. It's under affiliated agencies. And on the homepage, a little background about it, the board directors, email agenda, that kind of thing. The public notice, link to the public notice is also on the page. So you received most of the information that was included in the post during the public hearing on June 15th. Hopefully we'll load. There's a map of the basin based on the files that we submitted to DWR, our contact information. And this is just a brief description. So people can now go on and see that we are the only agency that is declared to be a GSA in our region. All of the information, and as we complete documents, like if we complete the bylaws prior to the end of our public notice, we'll update that information. So this is where it's going to sit, so people have a chance to view it, protest it. Hopefully no one else will declare to be a GSA, but I don't think that's going to happen, so I think we're good on that. But this is where all the information is, and it's a portal on the department's website, and all of the GSAs across the state are using it. So I just wanted you to know where our public notice is. And so far, so good. We haven't received anything additionally from the DWR other than it looks good and it's online. So
it's been on approximately 2 weeks.
And it will be on for a total of 90 days.
Yes. Okay. Any questions of staff? Seeing none, I appreciate that. When I went to look at the website earlier today, I did see that link, and I really appreciate having it there. I think it makes it easy for all of us as well as the public if they want to go in and take a look. Okay. Director's reports.
I got nothing.
You in? You're quiet today, Director Crane, Vice Chair Crane. All righty. Public comments on items not on the agenda. Anyone from the public that would like to speak, come forward, sir. And please state your name for the record.
I'm Stephen Wayne, Ukiah. I had a proposal here to get a grant for groundwater sustainability to enhance our groundwater table here by building a desalination plant. I talked to Mr. Oliphant and Fort Bragg about this last year, and also Director Jurdy. And I have 5 copies here to give to the staff here. I had another one for staff. I don't know, I'd have another member here. And this is just a grant and a map of what I'm proposing. And this is basically a study. I want to incorporate the college in this as well, but it'll be on a separate grant. So it's just to let you know, it has nothing to do with this except the study itself.
Great. And you can hand that to our clerk. It'll
Yeah.
have to go through her.
Sure.
And
I'd like the staff to get it. It's not
it will
for some reason it's printed on the back. So
we can make,
warrant, I find out.
sure. We can get that done and appreciate it.
cool, yeah.
And actually Supervisor Jurdy's not on this.
Yeah, I know. I know.
Oh,
But yeah, I thought he was like an alternate for you. Or it
That would be
possible.
Dan Hamburg. Is
Dan
the alternate.
Hamburg.
Great, yeah, great.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, sir. Anyone else? Seeing no one? Gosh, we did a great job in an hour and a half.
One last thing,
Oh,
if
I'm
you guys
sorry.
don't mind, and I'll wait for Nicole to get back to her seat. So we started utilizing, I just want to give this information to the board members and members of the public of where they can find all of the information. We're utilizing Legistar, which is a link so that you can, so as we get public comments or people drop off information, we scan that in and load that live. So you're always going to have it, but we'll have a link on our website how to get to this page, and it's kind of we will have all of the board items from all of these meetings online. And if you noticed in the email, the first page, the agenda, there's hyperlinks to all of the items. So if you click on those hyperlinks, it's going to take you to these pages. But this is a way that you can always pull up stuff, maybe on your iPad or your iPhone, or you're looking for items that came in during public comment. They'll all be uploaded here. You'll just have to make sure that you search for the Ukiah Valley Basin Groundwater Sustainability Agency, but that way you have all of the meeting details, all of the agendas, and all of the attachments, and this is where it will live. So our official page. But I wanted you all to know that so you have easy access to all of the records of the agency. And as we have items that are going to be executed, whether it's agreement or resolutions, they'll also be uploaded.
Great. Any questions of staff?
Our next meeting is second Thursday next month. Here.
See none? Yes, it is. Do we have the date on that?
That
Or
date
did
is
we
August
list it?
10th.
It would be August 10th, 1:30 here in these chambers. Okay. We're adjourned.